The moment Alara Vance stepped into the Grand Assembly chamber, silence fell like a guillotine. Every representative from the 100 Species Alliance turned their multifaceted eyes, feathered heads, neural coils, and shimmering lenses toward the lone human woman walking the aisle in a sleek black suit. She walked with the posture of someone who had studied her enemies so thoroughly they mistook her poise for weakness. The chamber was carved from obsidian and laced with radiant minerals harvested from collapsed stars. It had been built to intimidate. It only made her more certain. They expected fear. Instead, she gave them calculation. The Terran Republic recognizes the floor, the speaker rasped, its voice bouncing across bone-hollowed acoustics. It belonged to the Varaxi, a centipede-like arbiter species that hadn't fought a war in 5 centuries. Its voice was ancient, ceremonial, and reeked of politeness sharpened into a weapon. Alara raised her chin. "I speak not as a soldier, but as a diplomat of peace." Laughter came first from the Threx Dominion seats, then echoed from the Zoran rings. Even the quiet Votel clicked their translucent mandibles in amusement. The human woman in a business suit had come to beg for mercy. Or so they thought. She glanced briefly at the vote matrix. 97 species present. 2 abstentions. 1 outlier. The room's verdict had already been coded into their neural ledgers. "You came unescorted," the Gulkar ambassador chortled, its oily tendrils slapping the armrest. "Where is Earth's armada now?" She gave no answer. Her silence worked harder than rebuttal. "You are here," the speaker intoned, "to submit the Terran Republic's response to the Alliance's formal vote." Alara nodded once. "Earth's position remains unchanged. We decline annexation, servitude, or economic integration under forced conditions. Humanity is not for sale, nor will it be subjugated under quorum-backed enslavement." A wave of murmurs pulsed through the chamber. Some expected this. Most welcomed it. "Then by collective ruling," the speaker announced, "humanity will be classified as an uncooperative frontier species. All rights to independence are forfeit. And your people, reassigned." There it was. The decision wasn't diplomatic. It was predatory. The Zoran were the first to cast their vote, yes. So were the insected Kel, the gelatinous Vroth, the predatory Nilari, and 83 others. Alara didn't react when the Council's edict was finalized in under 60 seconds. There had never been a path to negotiation. Only theater. "You are hereby stripped of ambassadorial protections," the speaker declared. From both sides of the chamber, armored guards marched in, Sorth Dominion soldiers, whose gleaming exosuits reflected the flames burning behind their eyes. Their rifles were not ceremonial. Their chains were not metaphorical. They approached her as if she were prey. Still, Alara didn't move. The nearest Sorth reached for her arm. She met his gaze. "If you touch me," she said evenly, "you won't live long enough to regret it." He sneered through his rebreather. "You're already a slave." He grabbed her. The guards marched her down the aisle, dragging her past the silent glares of species who'd signed her sentence. Some didn't even watch. To them, it was finished. But none of them noticed the flicker behind her left eye, the pulse of a buried neural implant sinking silently with a satellite 2 systems away. By the time they tossed her into the cold steel cell aboard the Sorth Dominion flagship, that signal had already reached Earth. She landed hard, shoulder first, but made no sound. Chains wrapped around her wrists, linked to the floor. The room was reinforced with carbonite steel, magnetic locks, and atmosphere-reducing pressure. Designed for things stronger than humans. She didn't care. 2 Sorths stood outside her cell, speaking in clicks she understood too well. They debated how much she'd fetch once sold, and how long she'd survive. One suggested dissecting her after interrogation. The other wanted to break her publicly on Vardaxis Prime. She closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. Humanity had always known this would come. The galaxy feared what it didn't understand, and it had never understood Earth. The Terran Republic had never wanted war, but they had prepared for one, silently, in code and cybernetics and buried contingencies. This, too, was part of the plan. Elara's capture was a calculated sacrifice. Her status had guaranteed her access to the deepest corridors of the Council's data systems. They'd taken her neural interface as a trophy. They didn't know it contained Earth's darkest key. Not a weapon. Not a fleet. A virus. Project Obsidian had one mission: if humanity were ever enslaved, the systems that chained them would eat themselves alive from the inside out. All Elara had to do was stay alive long enough to watch it happen. Hours passed. She sat in silence. Monitored. Recorded. Poked with low-grade scans. She remained cooperative, docile even. Her pulse was steady. Her eyes unblinking. They wanted her broken. She gave them boredom. Her cell door opened again. A Sorth commander entered, flanked by 2 drone escorts. He spoke through a translator. "You are not special," he hissed. "We've enslaved stronger, smarter, faster creatures." "Then you've never enslaved something patient," she replied. He raised a hand. Pain lanced through her spine, an electrical spike triggered by a pulse device. She convulsed, then went limp. He leaned in. "You will crawl for us," he whispered. "You will scream, and we will stream it to your people." Elara coughed blood, smiled faintly, and whispered back, "Then stream this." Her eyes flared. The cell lights died. Emergency klaxons howled through the vessel. Power surged, then failed entirely. The ship's AI stammered incoherently before crashing into silence. Doors unlocked at random. Fire suppression systems activated unprovoked, flooding halls with coolant gas. Weapon racks deactivated. Life support began cycling air out of command centers. And through the chaos, a single message beamed outward. Protocol Obsidian engaged. Across 4 systems, Dominion relays failed. Drone fleets turned and fired on their command hubs. Communications choked. Banking AI rewrote ledgers to 0. Navigational satellites spun blind. Orbital defenses turned inward. The Sorth Dominion collapsed in 32 hours. And Elara Vance, still in her torn suit, walked barefoot through the carnage, untouched by fire or blade, flanked by liberated prisoners who now followed her without chains. She reached the nearest Council broadcast node and activated the uplink. The galaxy watched her face reappear, bruised but unbowed, staring into their millions of eyes. "You wanted obedience," she said, voice calm. "You voted for slavery. You got a countdown." She looked down at a wrist pad, newly recovered from the fallen commander's remains. The timer hit 0. In a distant sector, a sun went dark. A mining colony screamed into static. An orbital palace housing 3 council species simply vanished. Elara never blinked. "This was mercy," she said. "Next time, we send humans with guns instead of words." The screen went black. In the hushed echo of that galactic silence, every surviving species knew what came next. And none of them were ready. The galaxy did not sleep the night Elara Vance reappeared. Across trade stations and throne worlds, inside military citadels and diplomatic halls, every screen repeated her message. Some species scrambled to cut the transmission. Others tried to bury it. But it spread like code through bloodstream, rewired into every system they thought secure. They had voted to enslave her. Now they watched their skies burn. The Kel Syndicate was the next to fall. A single orbital relay, a minor communications tower orbiting the second moon of Lurash, suddenly rerouted every ship under Kel control. Half their fleet crashed into a dwarf sun. The other half turned weapons inward, thinking their enemies had disguised themselves aboard their own vessels. 3 hives self-purged. Queen clusters dissolved in panic, each blaming the others. The virus wasn't brute force. It was elegance dressed in vengeance. Every command structure Elara had quietly mapped during her 3-year diplomacy was now being weaponized from the inside. The galaxy hadn't just enslaved a diplomat, they had handed her their blueprints in the process. On the Gulkara homeworld, rain turned to ash as atmospheric processors reversed polarity. Broadcast towers looped footage of Elara in her cell, eyes bloodied but bright, whispering the words, "This is your legacy." The species that had mocked humanity's size, their diplomacy, their perceived softness, were now realizing they hadn't just declared war. They had declared it against a species that wrote strategy in centuries and vengeance in code. At the Galactic Council seat, those who remained convened in frantic emergency quorum. The speaker's throne sat empty. The Varaxi had imploded from within, victim of their own sentient database, which now recited human poetry in endless loop as it burned itself out. They warned us, the Zoran delegate muttered, 8 eyes twitching independently. They said Earth was not to be underestimated. You voted for her chains, hissed the Votel. We all did. She was one woman. She was one virus. No, said a voice behind them. She was one opening. Elara Vance entered the chamber. No guards flanked her. No weapons gleamed on her hips. Just the same black suit mended. Just the same steady walk. The chamber trembled in silence. Those who hadn't fled or self-destructed could only stare. How are you here? Croaked the Zoran ambassador, blinking as though she were a hallucination. You assumed you killed Earth's warning system when you captured me, she said. You didn't understand. I was the warning system. She reached the platform where the speaker once sat and placed a black crystal disc on its pedestal. Light spread upward in tendrils. The entire chamber darkened. And then, for the first time in its long, dictatorial history, the Galactic Council chamber became an auditorium. A playback began. It showed every vote. Every sneer. Every word spoken as they condemned her species to enslavement. From multiple angles. In multiple languages. The betrayal was not hidden. It had been recorded by her retinal implants, uploaded across dozens of quantum caches, time-released by biometric triggers. You didn't just enslave me, she said quietly, as their betrayal echoed behind her. You gave me the evidence I needed to dismantle your credibility system by system. The transmission ended. I am not here for vengeance, she continued. I'm here to broadcast a choice. She turned to face them. Surrender control of your planetary AIs to independent arbitration. Cease all offensive manufacturing. Disband the slaver markets. Turn over your deep vault encryption keys. And if we refuse? A voice dared. You won't. Screens ignited across the chamber, showing 20 more worlds erupting in chaos. Massive ships blinked out of existence. Command centers burned. Biological supercomputers sang lullabies in extinct Terran dialects as they imploded. She stepped down. This is what humans do when we try peace, and it's ignored. This is us being reasonable. Back on Earth, humanity didn't cheer. There was no parade. No global speech. No camera pointed at the sky. Their work was already done. In a bunker beneath Antarctica, a dozen engineers monitored the progress of Protocol Obsidian's cascade effect. None smiled. All understood the cost. But they also understood the necessity. Peace was an option the galaxy had rejected. In a repurposed ship drifting silently through decommissioned war zones, Elara watched the Council fold itself into compliance. Not out of fear of war, but the terror of collapse. The Sorth were no more. The Kel begged for AI isolation. The Gulkara offered reparations in blood. And still, she felt nothing like triumph. Her assistant, a young Terran hybrid named Leon, approached carefully. What now? She stared at the stars. Now they remember. Not me. Not what I did. But what it cost. Leon hesitated. They're begging for mercy. Some of them mean it. I know, she said. Will you give it? I already have. He looked confused. She explained, her voice low. I gave them this. Chaos, without annihilation. Exposure, without eradication. Shame, without silence. Mercy isn't what you give after victory, it's what you allow instead of extinction. He said nothing. Only nodded, slowly. A broadcast request came through. It was from the remnants of the Council. Not an attack. Not a plea. A child's voice, trembling. Ambassador Vance, please. Let us live. Elara closed her eyes. The child couldn't have been more than 12. A translator. A symbol. A desperate maneuver to gain sympathy. She responded without venom. You will live. But you will live differently. Never again will you vote on the fate of a species you do not understand. Never again will you enslave for profit. You will learn. Or you will vanish. The child didn't reply. Transmission ended. Later, alone in her quarters, Elara stared at a single artifact. A council pin. Torn from her lapel during her humiliation. She'd kept it. Not as a trophy, but as proof of what happens when diplomacy is mistaken for powerlessness. Outside, the stars shifted. A new alliance was forming, born not from treaties but fear. A galaxy reorganizing itself around a center it never expected to rise. Earth didn't seek dominion. It had just removed itself from prey. And as the void whispered its ancient hum, Elara leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a breath. Just one. Because mercy, she knew, was exhausting. But survival? That was just beginning.